All right, we're rocking now. If you've been following along with the documentation, you should have gone through the ideology and you should start feeling the indoctrination from deep inside. Maybe. Probably not, though. And if you do feel anything like that, seek medical attention immediately. But now we're on to the fun stuff. We're going to build our first skill. Okay, technically we're not onto the fun stuff yet because first we're going to spend a minute setting up VS Code. That means we're going to add the VS Code executable to our path so we can run code commands from the terminal, and we're going to do some keyboard shortcuts. So let's start by adding the code CLI to the path so we can run commands from terminal. Run code commands, that is. So I'm going to open up VS Code. From in here, I'm going to go Command-Shift-P, and we're going to type shell and install code command in path. And then we're going to have to authenticate. Fantastic. The next thing we're going to do is set up some keyboard shortcuts. Now, you don't have to do this, and you can customize them how you want. I'm in a virtual machine that does not take in all the keyboard shortcuts, so I'm going to have to change them for the purposes of this demonstration. But, again, you can set them to whatever you want. So the first thing I'm going to do, because I do not want to use the keyboard shortcut setup in macOS by default, I am going to disable the input sources shortcuts because I want to use these shortcuts. But again, you don't have to do that. So then I'm going to jump back to the Spruce Theater, go down to Help, go to Help Docs. Now that we're in here, I'm going to go Keyboard Shortcuts. Here are the two paths. You can set up just the basics. Highly recommend you at least do this because we're going to use this first one a lot and the second one. Or you can set up all my shortcuts. Now, because I'm in a VM and everything's been reset, I'm going to do all shortcuts. Copy, jump back into VS Code, Code, Settings, Keyboard Shortcuts. I'm going to flip it over with this, and I'm going to Command A, Command V. Now, one last thing I'm going to do to customize this is because I'm in this VM, not all the shortcuts, keyboard shortcuts make it through, and for some reason, Control Space won't work through. So I'm going to use Control Shift Space as the Spruce CLI command. So I'll hold Control Shift Space, and it pops up there with Spruce. That's exactly what we want. Okay, now VS Code is ready. I'm just going to close out of it. It is going to close out of this help. It's time to review the wireframes. Chapter 1, Dashboard. We're going to start by creating a root skill view, then a card. We're going to require login. We're going to customize the card's header. We're going to put some buttons in. Pretty easy stuff. Before we get into code, though, let's review views as a concept in the platform. Once again, I'm going to jump back to the development theater. I'm going to go help and then to help docs. I'm going to go to concepts and views. So in a normal web-based framework, quote unquote, normal web-based framework, you're going to work with routes. Routes are going to load HTML or content. It's similar in principle, but it is different in implementation. So instead of, we still have routes in the platform, but instead of an index.html file, we have skill views. So when you visit a route, what's actually happening is a skill view is being rendered. A skill view is comprised of card views, and inside of card views, we have a card header, a body, and a footer. Inside the card body, we have card sections. Inside a card section is where we're going to render all of our other views. So if I go to pull up the skill view for my skill, it's going to initially load the RootSkillViewController. Think of it as your index.html file in a Next.js app or something similar. Now what we're going to do, we're going to create our first skill. I'm going to jump over to terminal. I'm just in my home directory. The user I've created for this virtual machine is Edge. I'm going to create a directory called development. You don't have to do this. You call whatever you want. Inside of development, I'm going to create our first skill. So I'm going to spruce create.skill, and we're going to call it, or I'm going to call it 8-bit stories. This is the name of the directory it's going to create. We still have to name our skill and set it up and such. But you can call it anything you want. Story time, my skill, anything you want. Here we go. And what is the name of your skill? I'm going to call it 8-bit stories. How would you describe your skill? Epic bedtime stories for epic families. Yeah, cool. So this is going to create all the necessary files to get our skill started, as well as install necessary dependencies. So for those of you who are used to the Node ecosystem, know that installing dependencies can be boring, let's say. Well, we filled the time with some games. So for the sake of this, I'm going to try to set a high score, but so you don't have to sit and watch, we're going to do it at 2x speed. And go. Oh my gosh, that was really fast. Let's take a look at what just happened. So create skill summary. Generated files 10, installed packages 21. Now, as you see here, we get the packages names and whether or not they're development packages. And what you will see is that almost all of the production dependencies are dependencies that have been built by Spruce Labs, which means they are fully TDD'd and regression proof. And there is a reason that our dependencies are mostly built in-house. Didn't start that way, but once the things you depend on start to break, you start to figure out ways around that, because after all, you're only as strong as your weakest third-party dependency. So we got a lot of dev stuff there. And then check it out here. Here are the files that were created for us. From an MVMRC, our index files, we have a Spruce error file. So errors in this platform are first-class citizens. And that's what I found, is that if you can gracefully handle errors, you get a lot of leeway when things don't exactly work the way you meant for them to, which in this platform generally means you missed a test. So I like to joke, there are no bugs in Spruce. There are only tests we have not written yet. Okay, let's keep reading. This is so much fun. Let's keep moving. When you're ready, go ahead and run cd 8-bit stories and code dot to open VS Code. Once VS Code loads, open the terminal and type spruce setup.vscode. Hint, you're going to want to install all extensions and set up all features, which means a yes for everything. See you there. Let's do it. cd 8-bit stories and code dot. I'm going to full screen this. Do you trust the authors? Yeah, okay, all right. Fantastic. I'm going to hit Control tilde. It's going to open up the terminal window. I'm going to hide the file explorer with Command B. Now, because I'm always on a widescreen display, I prefer my terminal to be in the right-hand column, so I can have code on one side, terminal on the other side, or test runners, where a test runner is going to be running. So I'm going to go panel position right. You do not have to do this. I just, again, find on a widescreen device, this is optimal. All right, it's spruce setup.vscode. And here we go. I'm going to hit A to install all these. Here we go, installing 3 sections. And that was done. That was fast. Want me to set up debugging for you? Default option is yes. Let's do it. Do you want me to set up settings for building, testing, and linting on save? Yes. This means that tests are going to run as we're saving files. They're also going to lint themselves. So you don't even have to worry about formatting. Just get the code to run, hit save. It'll format it all for you. And then how about we start all the watchers when we start VS Code? Yes. All right, check this out. So we've got some more stuff created here. Okay, now that that's done, let's make sure Visual Studio Code can run tasks whenever you open the project. Open the command palette. That's Command-Shift-P, and type manage. And you can see right here, there is tasks, manage automatic tasks, and allow. Now I'm going to type Command-Shift-P P and type reload. And we're gonna reload the window, not web views. All right. Now it's installing 5 dev dependencies for tests. This is the test feature. While this is running though, I'm gonna make one more adjustment to my layout. Do you see over here on the right-hand side, here are all the terminal windows? I don't need this additional space taken up, so I'm gonna right-click and go hide tabs, which actually might be better called render as dropdown. All right, look at that. We have our test runner up, but there's nothing to test, so it's in its ready and waiting state. So I think now's a good time to go through the wireframes. Remember, we're going to create the root skill view. We're going to enable login. We're going to render a card, set the header into an image, and some buttons that aren't going to do anything for this first one. And this is all going to be under the root skill view. Let's jump back over to VS Code. I'm going to hit Control Shift Space. You might have set that to just Control Space, which is my preferred shortcut. I just can't do it in the VM I'm in. It defaults to create test. I'm going to hit enter. All right, what type of tests are we going to be creating? Behavioral or implementation? So think of a behavioral test as it testing the way your skill behaves, and think of behavior as a change in state. And think of implementation as anything that enables that change in state, but that is happening behind the scenes in such a way that you could essentially change the implementation, but have it not change a behavior. And well, what you'll find is that because we rely on semantic versioning and we do it pretty tightly, that there's some rules you can use to know what type of version changes are necessary. So if you're adding a behavior, it is a minor change, version change. If you are changing a behavior, it's a major change. This can be changing a behavior, which a lot of times means changing an event signature, which means anybody who depends on you now has to make adjustments. And if you're changing anything in the implementation folder, well, it's just a patch. So nobody even knows. Nobody outside of the team you're building on, or just yourself, nobody should care. So if I depend on your skill and you change an implementation, should be no big deal. Well, because this is the RootSkillViewController test we're writing, and it is essentially the entry point to the experience that we're building, we're going to start with a behavioral test. And then what are you testing? We're testing the root skill view. Camel case name, just to make sure that it's got it correctly. That's root skill view. That's fine. We're going to hit go. And because we're building into the Spruce platform with a skill with views and all the constituent pieces, we're going to choose the abstract Spruce fixture test. The Spruce fixture test gives us fixtures that help us set up our testing environment, and the fixtures very closely align with the concepts. So if we were to go back to here and we'll go down to concepts, there are event fixtures or view fixtures, permission fixtures, store fixtures. There's not one for everything, but it's a pretty close mapping. All right, we did it. One test. Okay, let's jump back to here. Let's go to our test reporter. Oops, before you do any tests, you need to run set remote. So I'm gonna hit Control Shift Space. I'm gonna run set.remote. All right, before you can set remote, we got to install some features. Don't worry, I'll walk you through it. So the schema feature. So the schema library, so if I go to our documentation, go to schemas, is how we give shape and form to our data. And it's got a lot of validation and normalization features built in. So this is how we can ensure the integrity of our data. So I'm going to let that install. All right. Install the permissions feature. If we jump back to concepts, see we have a permission section. Also, in order to really interface with Mercury and the theater in any way, we do need permission functionality. So that's gonna install right now. Now we're done with that. Let's get back to set remote. We're gonna set it for local development. Now we're installing the event feature. Again, we jump back over here. We have events. Events are how the system communicates, how you communicate with another skill, and we need that to also register views because the view functionality, the front end, is actually provided by the Heartwood skill. In order for the Heartwood skill to render our skill views, we need the event system to send things over. Alrighty, now I think we're good. So let's go here, let's go open, and let's create our first RootSkillViewController. To start, I'm gonna hide this minimap. I don't really care for it. Shrink this a little bit so we can get this stuff in view. And I'm going to delete this test with Command Shift K, cuts a line. And let's construct our first RootSkillViewController. So we'll go this dot views dot controller. So this is our controller, our view controller factory method. The views fixture, if I hover, you can see this is the views fixture, makes certain functions of the view factory available to us, the view controller factory. Let's go 8-bit stories dot root, and then the second argument to the controller factory method is options, and we're just gonna, for skill views, we're just gonna leave that empty. When we start rendering cards and other things, which we'll get to, we will be passing options in the form of a view model to those view controllers. So save. All right, no views have been found. If you're testing, run spruce create.view. So let's do it. Control Shift Space or Control Space create.view. And which are we creating? A skill view controller or a view controller? Well, in this case, it's our RootSkillViewController. So let's choose that. Now we're installing our views functionality because, or the views feature, because that has not been installed yet because we haven't needed it yet. So piece by piece, we're going to be building this thing up. All right. Do you want to create a root view controller so it can detect that we had not created our RootSkillViewController yet? So let's do that. Yes. All right. Fantastic. So we're going to go to here. I couldn't find a view controller. Okay, look at this. See how it says 8-bit.stories? Well, we can't have our skill starting with a number. So the way we're going to give our skill's namespace something that we want is we're going to have to register the skill. So let's do that. I'm going to hit Control Shift tilde, and I'm going to go spruce register. And the skill is going to be, I'm going to call it 8-bit stories. And then what's the namespace of the skill? I'm going to say 8-bit stories, all one word, all together. And there we go. So if I go to package, you can see our skill's namespace is 8-bit stories. Now that I've registered it with 8-bit stories, I'm going to go sync.views. This is going to ensure that all the views line up with the namespace. Close this, go back to test reporter. There it is. We have a RootSkillViewController. So let's go take a look at it. I type root SVC. That fuzzies are super helpful. And here it is, our basic empty RootSkillViewController. It's got an ID of root. It extends the abstract skill view controller. It's got a render method, which is going to be empty cards. So let's do this next step. If you recall from the wireframes, we have a card. So let's render our first card. In order to do that, we are going to have to, actually, you know what? I don't need async, just have it. Renders card. So I'm gonna go VC assert, skill view renders card. And let's go this.vc. Or no, that's not going to work. Let's construct our VC. Const VC equals this.views.controller. Let's do 8-bit stories root. And let's call it VC. This should fail. There we go. It says, oh, look. card. Okay. Expected your skill view to render a card, but it did not. That is accurate. So let's go to the root skill view controller. Let's go into the constructor, and let's say this.card VC equals this.control. Now, because we're in a view, we have the controller factory method available for us much easier than, let's say, in the test, where we have to access it via the views fixture. So now that I close that window, I'm going to hit Control minus. That's going to bring me back in history to where I was. And look at all these views. We have view controllers we have available. Let's just do a card. And let's just set a header and a title. Hello world. Then inside of here, inside of our render method, we're going to go with this.card vc.render. And that should pass. All right. Now that that's working, let's, do you want to go see it? Let's go see it. Let's go check it out. Now, in order to get your skill view to register with Heartwood to make it visible, you have to boot your skill. But because we're working on the skill view now in real time, I'm actually just going to turn on our view watcher. So I'm going to hit Control Shift Space, and we're going to type watch.views. So you can see here's where it's hosted, but I want to go check it out in the development theater. So you can see here, file, new theater at destination, or Command Shift N. So I'm going to Command Shift N. It's going to ask me where I want to go. I hit Tab and let's type 8. There it is. Up arrow, 8bitstories.root. Hello world. Heck yeah. All right, let's get back to what we were doing here, and let's clean a few things up while we're on it. Let's first declare this card VC property. So I click on it, hit Command period, go declare property. Let's make it private, and let's make it a card view controller. That has removed that type error. And then also, if you see in here, we have some redundancy. We're constructing a root skill view controller here and one here. So let's leverage the test files state to keep us from having to instantiate this root skill view controller multiple times. So I'm going to go protected static async before each, await super dot before each, and then let's do this. Let's change this to this. Let's change this here. I should be able to save that. It should still pass. Perfect. Now I'm going to click this.vc. I'm going to hit Command period, declare static property. And let's go private. Now look at this import. That's pretty ugly. I don't care for that. So let's change this to root skill view controller. Enter. Sweet. Now let's move this up to the before each. And let's close, or let's remove this test because, well, it's going to be constructing a root skill view controller every test. So we'll remove that. Now, let's jump back into the root skill view, and let's, according to our wireframe, we want a header image. No, actually, I almost missed this. So let's require login. Go here, and let's go into here, into our test. Let's go test. Did static async requires login. Await vc assert requires require login. So assert login is required. This.vc. This is gonna fail. Bam. Your skill view 8bitstories.root does not require login, and it should. Try implementing public async get login is required return true. All right, let's do that. So you can select this. Anything you select in the test reporter is going to automatically be copied to the clipboard. So let's just go down here, paste, save. All right, so now login is required. Let's keep moving. Let's go back to the wireframe. Let's drop in the picture here. So jumping into the root skill view controller, here is the card into the header. Let's delete title, hit single quote, and this will show you all the things that are available inside the header of a card. You have your close handler, a controller. Now, this is for a card header view controller. We actually are not going to really rarely ever use that. Then you can set, or you can set an icon, an image. You can change how the image sizes itself. We can set a subtitle and a title. So for now, we're going to do an image. And where should we point this image? I actually have one in the clipboard ready to go. I'm going to paste that in, hit save. Now, very rarely are we testing the presentation. So this image, for example, we could write a test that ensures the header image equals this. Very seldom, though, do I like to actually do assertions against the presentation, content, images, things like that, because how it presents itself is more about an implementation detail than a behavior. And images and content and copy, these things change a lot, and I don't want the tests to fail every time we change an image. So I tend to very seldom change an image, except in times where maybe changing something on the skill view changes, let's say, the title of a card, which can happen. In those cases where there's actual interactivity and things are coupled in some way, and I do want to ensure that changing an input field updates a header, then I'll write the tests against it. But for now, we're just dropping in a header image. I'm not really concerned about it, so I do not want to test it. So I've dropped that in. Now, because we're watching views, I should be able to go back here, click in and hit Command R to refresh. Bam, there it is. A card with a header and an image. So let's keep going. The last piece of this, if we jump over the wireframes, is we've got the root skill view. We've got login required. We're rendering a card. We're adding a header image. Now we're going to render some buttons. And then that's it. We're done with chapter 1. So let's do the test to render some buttons. Go test, objective static, renders expected buttons. And then we're going to do button assert dot card renders buttons. We're going to go with this.vc dot get card vc, and the buttons we want are values, members, feedback, right. So members, values, feedback, right. And just because I am being a little pedantic and a little OCD, I'm going to do values first. This is kind of the order I want the buttons, but order doesn't matter. So if you've been paying attention, you'll see that get card VC, in fact, does not exist anywhere. And we are not going to create it. We're not going to expose that level of implementation to the broader world or to anybody who's interfacing with our skill view via code. We're actually going to use our first test of all. We're going to create a spy. So I'm going to go class spy root skill view extends root skill view controller, and then we're going to create a public get card vc, and it's going to return this dot card vc. But this is still going to be mad at us because card vc is private. Well, I'm going to hold command and click on this and just going to make it protected. Now it's available. The next thing we got to do is we've got to tell the view controller factory to load the spy root skill view instead of our actual root skill view. Luckily, that's pretty easy. So we're going to go into the before each and go this.views.setController. And we're going to type 8. It's going to autocomplete for us. Lots of IntelliSense. And then we're going to set it there. Now, the fail should be your card is missing buttons with the following IDs: values, members, feedback, right. But if you notice, this is still mad at us because get card VC does not exist on the root, nor should it ever exist. But this is easy enough to address because we've overridden the view controller. We know it's using it. We just got to tell the typing system that we're using our test double. So I'm going to replace that there. This is going to get mad because 8-bit stories.root in fact does not give us a getCardVC method. But if we cast it, because we extend it and it passes, now our type issues are resolved. And the test is failing for the right reason because we are missing these buttons. So let's go put these buttons in. So I'm going to Command P. I'm going to type root.skillViewController. I'm going to go into body. And just if you want to, you can click in here and hit single quote, and you can see all the keys that are available. Inside of a body, here are the keys that are available. We're going to do a section. And a section, look at this. This is where everything you could ever want to render is available. Stats, talking spruce spot, text, titles, progress, portals, polar areas, pagers, maps, lists. You name it. Maybe it's in here. But it's always good to look because we tend not to add new view controllers until they're needed, until they're requested. That being said, if there's something you would like, a component or a view controller that you would like introduced into the platform, you can just request that through the documentation. For now, though, we are going to do buttons. And buttons is an array of buttons. And let's look at what a button has. It has an avatar, a controller. Again, usually you're not setting the controllers. That is mostly handled behind the scenes. You can do drop downs, hints, an ID, enabled, selected, on clicks, icons. Should queue show, so it should show immediately or fade in later, and should show the hint icon. For now, though, we want to make sure that our test is passing, so let's give it an ID, and the ID is values. I also would like it to have a label. How it renders, again, is not a thing we're going to be testing. So if you see I saved it, and it says your card's missing the buttons with the following IDs, values is gone, and now what remains is members, feedback, and write. So let me give this a label. Let's call it family values. Let's give our next one, which is members, and let's call it family members. I like to save often just to make sure that I'm not going too far off the rails. And we got 2 more buttons to do, feedback and write. So let's do it. ID, feedback, label, feedback, and then ID, write, and label, write. And we're passing. We have a card, we have it requiring login, and we render the expected buttons. But do you see how I have like it looks like I have a warning, something there? Let's just go address that, just because I don't like the idea of there just being warnings hanging out. So I'm gonna hit Command K, P. That's gonna bring me to my next problem. Looks like the insert library that's being included here is not being used, so I'm gonna delete it. I'm gonna hit save. You notice how it removed that comma for me when I saved it. So now, if I hit Command K, P, there are no errors, so there's nowhere to jump. Now this has been watching, so if I go to here and hit Command R, there we go. Let's do one more thing before we start doing a little bit of cleanup. Let's make this right button the primary button so it stands out. So I'm gonna go to root.svc, go to buttons, right, and do type primary. That test, that should absolutely pass. Let's run back, let's go refresh. There it is. So let's do a little cleanup and then you can play around with this and get started on chapter 2. Now, one thing I'm personally a stickler about, and I think really helps make your code more readable, is keeping your constructors very, very thin. I just want to know when I'm looking at your constructor, generally what you're doing. I don't need to know all about how you're doing it. So like, for instance, creating a card view controller, that's helpful to know, but it is not as helpful to know that there's a header and a body and sections. And so I'm going to select the controller factory method that's being invoked here. I'm going to press Control-Shift-R and go to extract to method. I'm going to extract it. I'm going to call it card view or card VC. Remove that line with the little Command-Shift-K. Now, as you can see, the constructor tells us everything we need to know about this view controller. It's got one card. If we want to look at what the card does, I can command click on that, which just brings me here. And we're good. So now we refresh, nothing has changed. We go back to the wireframes. Look at this. We've created our root skill view. We've set it to require login. We rendered our card. We added a header image, and we've rendered our buttons. And it looks pretty good. Pretty good start. Now, what you can do at this point is just kind of play around with what is available in your card view controller. So for instance, if I click here and I go here and I go line icon and then single quote, look at this. There's a fave heart. There's, is there users, plural? Save. Let's see what this looks like. Make sure the test passes. Of course it will. We're not testing presentation. Oh, look, there's a little family icon. So with that, go ahead, experiment, play, and when you're ready, jump back on to chapter 2. All right. See you there.